Hello, it's Cindy from Greetings and Memories here again today. Today what I wanted to talk about is a few different methods for coloring in your outline images. You'll see here that I've stamped one of the houses from our Coming Home stamp set. This is one that I'll be featuring for one of my November Christmas card classes, but you can certainly use it for other occasions throughout the year. But I know there's several new stampers that are joining my classes that maybe don't know different methods for coloring outline images. So what I've done here is I've stamped with the Memento black ink, and I'm going to show you 4 different ways you can color that in. It's by all means not every possible method, but those are the most common ones. I have our Stampin Blends alcohol-based markers that I'll be using first. And those come in sets of a light and a dark shade so that you can do a little bit of blending with those. I'll be honest with you, I am new to using alcohol ink markers and I'm by no means an expert at blending, but I'll give it a try and show you what I've learned so far. So as I said, those come in the light and dark together. The colors that I'm using are the colors that coordinate with the Trimming the Town papers that go along with that Coming Home stamp set. And the colors that are included in those papers are the Misty Moonlight, Pool Party, the Poppy Parade shade of red, Old Olive Green. We also have Espresso, which I'll be using the early Espresso marker, and I'll be using the ink pad, but that color is not available in the blends, so I'm using bronze instead. The bronze comes in a 2-pack with an ivory marker that I'm not going to be using, and then I've also got my color lifter handy here because you can use that to kind of correct any little mistakes that you might make and going outside the lines or whatever and clean it up and make it look a little bit neater. So as I said, I'll be using the Stampin Blends alcohol-based markers. I've also got my Stampin Write water-based ink markers. I'll be showing you how to color with the watercolor pencils and then blending the colors with the water brush. Now these do not come in all of the Stampin' Up! Colors, so I don't have the exact shades that I'll be using in the markers and ink pads, but I've chosen the ones that are like the closest I could get. And of course, when you're coloring your images, you can use whatever colors make you happy, but because I do want to layer these stamped images with the patterned papers, I've chosen to use the colors that coordinate. And then the other method that I want to show you is how you can watercolor with your ink pads if you haven't ever tried that. So I've got, again, those same colors, the Misty Moonlight, Pool Party, Poppy Parade, Early Espresso, and then I've got one of the older style pads there for my Old Olive ink. And as I mentioned, one of our water brushes there. So to get you started, I thought I'd show you first a couple of images that I've already colored. Now with these, I kept it really simple. I didn't really even attempt to do any blending. I did it all with just the dark shade with the markers, but I'll give blending a shot here for you and use both shades. So I'm going to start out by just coloring in the roof line with my bronze marker, and these are double-ended. They have a bullet point if you want to use that for detail work, and then the brush tip. And I tend to prefer the brush tip even when I'm doing thinner lines because I just vary the amount of pressure that I put on there to vary the width of the line. So hopefully I can do this without leaning my head too far into the shot, seeing what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm just gonna barely touch the tip of that marker down there because that is a fairly thin line that I'm coloring. And you can see I made a little boo-boo there. I got it outside the line. So this is where that color lifter comes in handy. And what you do with that is work it from the outside back toward the line where you want the ink to be. And that kind of fades it a little bit. It's not going to completely get rid of it, but it makes it a little bit less noticeable. See how that's faded away pretty much to nothing there. So that I haven't ruined that image. I can still use this stamped image and not worry about that a little bit there. And now I think I'm not going to color in the gable with that color. I am going to do something a little different. Oh, let's see here. What colors do we want to use? Let's do the Misty Moonlight. And like I said, I'll try to do a little bit of blending. So I'm going to start out by coloring that gable area in with the lighter shade. Get around that round window there. And like I said, I'm no expert on using the alcohol ink markers, so, but I've still been pretty pleased with the results that I've gotten with them. I guess the trick is to try not to go back over the same areas repeatedly, and I didn't do such a hot job with that. But now what I want to do is, in my attempt to blend a little bit, is I do want it a little bit darker right under the eaves where you would normally have a little bit of a shadow. So I'll go back in with my darker marker and put a little over. And then kind of maybe around the side of the window there too. It might be a little bit of a shadow there. When I go back, I can see I got a little white spot showing there. So I'll color that in a little more. And I'm going to do the door also in the Misty Moonlight shade, but I'm going to just go ahead and use my dark pen for that. I hope I'm not boring you guys here. Again, is watching someone else color kind of like watching paint dry? I hope not. And what color should we make? Let's make this house olive green. So I'll start with my light olive at the brush tip end here. And I guess I'm trying not to overlap my strokes too much there. I know those of you who are alcohol ink experts are probably laughing at me, but doing my best here. So maybe when I go and edit this video, I'll speed it up so it doesn't take so long. Okay, and now I'm going to go back in with my darker Old Olive Stampin' Blend. And again, I'm going to add a little darker color under the eaves there to kind of show where shadow might be. Maybe a little bit here. Maybe some darker color alongside the door and around the windows there. Just gives it a little bit more dimension to your markers. And I said, we'll call that good. And then one thing that I did, I don't know if you noticed that on these other houses that I did before, rather than having stark white windows, what I did is I took my lighter pool party marker and just kind of put just some faint little streaks there to kind of give some color to those windows. There, what do you think? So that is my example of using the Stampin Blends. And you can see where I did that little boo-boo there. Now that it's dry, you can barely see that. So I think that's still a usable image. And now I'm going to go ahead and do similar with the Stampin Write markers. And these also are double-ended. You have your brush tip and your fine point tip. What I particularly like these markers for is for scrapbooking. If I want to use colored ink for my journaling, these are great for that, with that bullet point. Or if you're into brush lettering, either one of these are good for brush lettering too. That's not a skill that I have, but something I like seeing what other people do with it. So I'm going to go ahead and use my espresso marker here. And we'll be a little bit different this time. I'll go ahead and color that gable in with the espresso this time too. A little white spot there. Oh, let's give it an olive colored door this time. So I'm pretty much doing the same motions that I did with the Stampin Blends marker, but you can probably see right here on the door, one of the differences is over here where I overlapped my lines, it's not as noticeable. Here with the watercolor, it's a little bit more noticeable when you overlap the lines. So I try not to do that, but it still happens. And we're gonna go ahead and make this a red house with a green door. So I'm using my Poppy Parade marker to fill in here. And again, I hope I'm not boring you while I'm doing this. So I don't want to go too fast because that's when I get sloppy and make mistakes. So. Thinking in hindsight, maybe I should have done my lines horizontally and then they would have looked more like siding on the house, but oh well, already doing it this way. And I'm going to do that same little trick with the pool party ink to kind of give a little bit of color to our windows. I would be really careful not to go too much here though, because this color is darker. That's the main difference between the blends. Stampin Blends and the Stampin Write is with the Stampin Blends you have the 2 shades, and with the Stampin Write you just have the 1. So there you can see the difference between doing it with the alcohol-based markers versus the water-based markers. And now I'll go ahead and do one for you with the watercolor pencils and the water brush. Now, as I said, I don't have the same colors available to me in the watercolor pencils. They're a little bit more limited. They do have 2 assortments available. I'm using colors from assortment number 2, which includes Cherry Cobbler, which is one of the colors I've got out here. Flirty Flamingo, Cajun Craze, which is what I'm using as my more brownish shade. Crushed Curry, Granny Apple Green, Garden Green. And then I'm using Coastal Cabana in place of Pool Party. Balmy Blue, Night of Navy, which is one of the colors I've got out. And Gorgeous Grape are what comes in that assortment. So, as I said, I've chosen the ones that are as close as I could get to the colors recommended to go with the Trimming the Town Suite. So I'll be using the Cajun Craze here to color in the roof line. And let's see, what color do we want our house to be? Should we do it in green and blue like the first one? So let's go ahead and color in blue for the door. And again, it's this Night of Navy is what they're calling this one. To be honest with you, I don't think it's a perfect match to our navy ink, but yeah, that's what they're calling it. So and then I'll color in the house with some garden green here. Okay, now the magic comes in. The beauty of these watercolor pencils is when you use the water brush to kind of blend the color. And you can see how that's kind of changing the look of it a little bit there. I'll clean that color off. Go in and blend the blue a little bit. So there's another way that you can add color to your outline images. Although, as I said, you're not going to get perfect match to those papers, but I can put a little smidgen of blue in those windows there, just because I don't like seeing the stark white windows. There. Okay. And then this is one of my favorite ways of watercoloring rather than using the pencils, and also because we have all colors available, so I know they're going to match my papers, is I like to watercolor with my ink pads. And if you haven't ever tried that, how that works is take your ink pad while it's closed and give it a squeeze, and then what happens is you end up with some ink transferred to the inside of the lid. Slide those over out of my way there. And then you pick up the color, pick up that ink with your water brush, and you can paint with your ink. So I'm using espresso again along the roof line. You see, you can vary the intensity of the color there a little bit if you want to. And then I'm going to clear the espresso out. And let's see, what colors do we want to use for this one? Let's do some Old Olive for the gable. And this, again, this is one of my old style ink pads, but it still works, so I still use it. One of the main differences, this old pad has like a linen texture fabric for the ink pad, and the newer pads are a firm foam, so you don't get that linen texture in your images. And when I'm watercoloring, I don't try to be too precise with it. That's one of the things with watercolors. You kind of let your colors bleed and blend a little bit. What do you say? Should we do the opposite of what we did on this end and do a blue house? So I'll go ahead and use the Misty Moonlight ink to color in. Oh, and I didn't squeeze it hard enough. There we go. Now I've got some ink inside there to work with. And I'll put the darkest bit right here along the eaves. You see I can kind of blend in that color out from dark to light there. And just to note that I am not using watercolor paper. I'm not using any kind of special paper. I'm doing this just right on our regular Whisper White cardstock. And then I'll go ahead and add a little bit of that Pool Party blue in the windows. It's like I said, I don't like the stark white windows. I like a little bit of color in there. So I'm going to give a little wash of Pool Party over those windows. So you can just barely see that Pool Party color, but it's just enough. So there you have it. Those are 4 different ways that you can color your outline images. And it's up to you, what you prefer, what works for you. We've got our Stampin Blends alcohol ink markers here, Stampin Write water-based markers, watercolor pencils blended out with the aqua painter or water painter. And then this one, I watercolored it with ink, straight from our ink pads. So I hope you've learned something new there. If you have any questions, shoot me a message. Be happy to answer them for you. And thanks for joining me.